Hey guys, welcome to my Frost Mage 10.2 guide. This is actually my first Frost Mage guide, but I wanted to do one this tier just because I actually really like this spec. So wanted to talk about it a little bit and explain it in my own way. If you haven't already watched it, I do recommend you watch Manathar's videos. He's probably a better Frost Mage than me, so do check him out. He plays that spec a lot. But yeah, so first off, just to talk about the format of these videos. Same as usual, part one I'll talk about rotation, some important concepts, and then part two I'll cover the like a video analysis of the gameplay. If you're looking for an AoE kind of deal and plus Frost Mage, I do recommend Manathers once again, frankly because I have absolutely zero interest in Frost AoE and I'm not going to make a video on it because it's not fun. But if you want that kind of thing, do watch his out. Anyway, to the talents. So as you can see, pretty standard thing. One thing you'll notice is I have chain reaction instead of slick ice here. Both of these are good. Basically the choice comes down to whether you want to double lust or not. If you want to double lust due to fight timers or something like that, then you can swap slick ice into chain reaction. And then that way you can double lust, so you'll double lust on the pull and then you'll lust like at presumably like 4 minutes 20 seconds. You might say, oh, there's no icy veins at 420. And yeah, technically, you could hold it till the next icy veins. But at that point, it's like, why are you even double lusting, right? You could have just played something else, like slick ice. So this is more of a specific like 5-minute timer or, depending on fight basis. Swap this out if you're not going to double lust. If you don't double lust, you either lust on icy veins, like icy veins 1, icy veins 2, and then like icy veins some number, like I don't know, 4 or 5, something down the line where it can line up. And obviously, if a fight ever runs out, you can adjust those timers so you can just lust after your current lust expires instead. So you lust 0 on pull, and then right after the first one ends, and then at some icy veins later down the line. Another key talent that I really want to talk about that a lot of people misconstrue or like misunderstand or don't realize that it's there is this one here, Wintertide. Basically, a big concept that I'm going to talk about is basically not caring about Fingers of Frost as much as some people might think. And part of it is due to this talent. Part of it is other things, obviously like main things, but this is a small part of it. Basically, what this reads is Fingers of Frost and Powered Ice Lances deal 20% increased damage to frozen targets, so targets with Winter's Chill. So, Fingers of Frost plus Winter's Chill does more damage than just Fingers of Frost or just Winter's Chill. 20% more damage, right? So this does mitigate the loss of the munching by a little bit. Not everything, obviously, but yeah, it's there. Anyway, back to or let me introduce you to my way of thinking about Frost. So I'm going to ignore this part here at the very top. We're going to talk about first the core rotation so that we can understand what is our objectives, and then we'll talk about how we use our cooldowns. So the way we think about Frost is in two ways, or we are in two modes. Either we have Winter's Chill active or we don't. And which one you have active dictates what you're going to do. The very obvious one is if you have Winter's Chill active, you're going to cast GS if you can, and if you can't, you'll cast Ice Lance. Right? Very simple. Outside of this, when you don't have Winter's Chill, then you're going to go into this other bracket, right? And this other bracket is the one that is a little more complicated and there's a little more nuance to it, and I'll talk about this. I should actually add a note here. I'll touch on it later. Hopefully, I don't forget. But yeah, so when you don't have Winter's Chill, you want to really be thinking once again in two different modes. The modes are: am I casting Frostbolt or not? Like, am I currently casting Frostbolt? If you are ever currently casting Frostbolt, you always follow it up with a Flurry. Okay? If you ever find yourself in the rotation where you're casting Frostbolt and there's anything else happening, the answer is always to Flurry right afterwards. Yes, you're going to feel like you're wasting procs. Trust me, it's worth it. There is some very, very minor things to talk about with this that I'm not going to touch into here. But yeah, 99.9% of the time, if you're casting Frostbolt, just cast Flurry. If you're not casting Frostbolt, however, this is where you have your other abilities, right? So obviously, if you have 5 Icicles, you're going to cast GS. If you have a Flurry to follow up with the GS, you press the Flurry. If you don't have a Flurry, then you just press GS. You don't need a Flurry to cast GS. You don't save Flurries for GS. You just press GS. It's not that deep, okay? Another interesting thing is, If you have specifically 4 icicles and you're not casting something, an example where might this happen is like, let's say you have 2 icicles and then you have 2 fingers of frost, you press ice lance, then you're at 4. In this situation, you want to just press flurry by itself. This way, the flurry will give you a 1 icicle, giving you 5, and then you'll do a frostbolt, and then you'll do a glacial spike into ice lance, okay? Well, Winter's Chill is already active. Why do we do this? Some might say, well, why do you not want to cast Frostbolt Flurry? It's weird that you just press Flurry by itself. You're gonna munch the first hit of Flurry, right? The first Winter's Chill. The reason we do this is because if you were to cast Frostbolt Flurry, you have a % proc chance to generate 2 icicles per, which is 33%. Per Frostbolt and Flurry, and also you're guaranteed to waste 1 icicle from casting the Frostbolt, right? In this situation, the wastage of icicles is actually not worth it relative to the 1 extra precast we get into it. If you want to think about it, think of it as you're guaranteed to waste 1/5 of a GS, and a certain % proc rate. I want to say it's like 33 plus, 33 of a 1. And then 33 of another, and then plus the odds of 2 33s together, which is 0.11. Yeah, you're wasting let's say 1.77 icicles every time you do that to get 1 frostbolt shattering. It's not worth it. You just press the flurry. If that math is complicated, if I did it wrong, I'm sorry. Just know it's not worth to cast the precast there in that situation if you have 4. If you had 4, just press flurry. After this, like I was saying, you just cast Frostbolt. If you're casting Frostbolt, you're going to press Flurry. More important than Fingers of Frost, right? So if you're casting Frostbolt and you have Fingers of Frost, just press Flurry. Screw the Fingers of Frost, okay? If you haven't yet started casting Frostbolt and you have the chance to use your Fingers of Frost, then use them first, right? But otherwise, obviously Frostbolt. So an example where this might be, let's say you just finished the Winter's Chill, right? So let's say you just did you did Flurry because you were at 4, and then you did GS Ice Lance, and then somehow you have Fingers of Frost charges. Then you can press Ice Lance because you haven't started casting Frostbolt yet, and then you still have Fingers of Frost, so you can press Ice Lance again. Once you're out of Fingers of Frost, then you start casting Frostbolt, right? Because you're out of Fingers of Frost. If you generate the Fingers of Frost during the Frostbolt cast, but you have a Flurry, you press the Flurry, right? Simple as. One thing that I didn't write down, which is going to sound complicated, and you'll notice an example of it in part 2, but basically, if you cast GS on your last Winter's Chill stack, and you have Fingers of Frost proc, do not GS into Ice Lance. If you do that, your GS will not shatter. This is because Fingers of Frost Ice Lance has a faster travel time than GS. So if you have only 1 Winter's Chill left and you do GS Ice Lance with Fingers of Frost, your Ice Lance will shatter before your GS. So even though it's a Fingers of Frost one, it will take your Winter's Chill and then your GS will just be sad, right? In that situation, you would just GS into Frostbolt. And then obviously if you have a Flurry after that Frostbolt, you'll press the Flurry. And it's going to feel bad because you're going to feel like you're wasting your Fingers of Frost, but it's worth it, okay? This is the core rotation. This is very, very, very important to learn and practice. If anything was confusing, rewatch. I would really recommend, if you're struggling to grasp a concept in this core rotation, think about a scenario that might happen that might confuse you if you're not sure about something, and try to answer it based on what I told you here. Think of it like a reading comprehension, yeah? And the answer is definitely within this, okay? There's no mystery. There's nothing missed out with this. Yeah. Outside of the core rotation here, we have some mini cooldowns that we need to talk about. The mini cooldowns are Comet Storm, Ray, Orb, and Shifting Power. Each of these has a cast condition, so something that makes you want to cast it, and obviously a goal behind why, and they have a priority, and you'll see the GS prio there I put in there. Outside of the GS prio, all these mini cooldowns are more important than the core rotation, and you will always press these cooldowns on cooldown. The only exception is, like I said here, the GS prio thing. If you do get to 5 icicles, and you have like Orb or Shifting Power up, you want to cast your GS first into the Flurry and then take care of these. But these two take precedence. So what are these mini cooldowns? Basically, Comet Storm is 30 seconds, Ray is 1 minute, Orb is 1 minute. It is not a coincidence that Comet Storm is half the cooldown, which means you get 2 Comet Storms per Ray/Orb. A very nice thing here about this is that you do want to sync them up. Okay. So for example, uh, usually the way it works is that you're going to be casting them, and we'll talk about the opener in a little bit. You're going to be casting them, and usually for the most part, the cadence or the sequence of events you end up casting these cooldowns is going to stay the same, because the conditions for them are going to always be the same. So what are the conditions? Comet Storm, if it can last through Winter's Chill. So what does this mean? Typically speaking, you're going to cast Comet Storm after your flurry, like right after your flurry. So let's say you like Frostbolt flurried or your GS flurried and you have Comet Storm, you press Comet Storm straight away. Okay? Comet Storm does not consume Winter's Chill, but does benefit from it. Okay? Now, why did I say if it can last through Winter's Chill and not just, oh, cast it after flurry? Because there are situations where usually what happens is if you cast Flurry, Comet Storm, Ice Lance, Winter's Chill will pretty much entirely hit during Comet Storm will entirely hit during Winter's Chill. Technically, like I think 1 or 2 bolts might miss, but it's like, you know, we don't care about that. But what's important is, let's say you just cast Flurry and Winter's Chill has 2 stacks, but Comet Storm has 1 second cooldown. If you Ice Lance and then and then Comet Storm comes off cooldown, if you were to Comet Storm, then Ice Lance, bad, right? Because Comet Storm will not last through Winter's Chill, right? Majority of Comet Storm will hit without Winter's Chill because the Ice Lance consumed it. However, if you were to have Comet Stormed and then Glacial Spiked on 1 Winter's Chill, or even Comet Storm into Ray of Frost on 1 Winter's Chill, because Glacial Spike and Ray of Frost are a longer cast time, this will buy time for Comet Storm to hit through the entirety of Winter's Chill. So good little optimization there. That's Comet Storm. As for Ray of Frost, the idea is you Ray of Frost if there's only 1 Winter's Chill. Why? Because basically once you start casting Ray of Frost, you're going to basically kill your Winter's Chill. It doesn't consume it, but it's such a long cast time that the Winter's Chill debuff will actually expire during the Ray of Frost cast time. And even if you do this properly, like you'll miss maybe 1 tick of Ray of Frost from Winter's Chill. But the idea is if you do it like on 2 Winter's Chill stacks, then obviously you're just wasting 1 Winter's Chill for no reason, because you're killing 2 instead of 1, right? So typically how this will go is you'll do something like a Frostbolt Flurry or GS Flurry, Comet Storm, right? Because you just did Flurry, and then you're gonna have 2 Winter's Chill, so you have to consume 1 using Ice Lance, right? Or GS if you have GS instead. And then once you're down to 1 Winter's Chill, then you're gonna start to Ray of Frost. Okay? So that's that. As for your third mini cooldown, which is Orb, Frozen Orb, right? Very simply, you'll cast Orb once Ray of Frost is on cooldown, sorry, and you don't have 2 Fingers of Frost. Why do we do this? Basically, if Ray is on cooldown and you start casting Orb, then that means that there's no chance that you're going to be like screwing yourself over. Let's think of the opposite situation. Let's think of if you cast Orb while Ray is available. Then what happens is if you do Orb and then Ray, your Ray will be wasting an insane amount of Fingers of Frost because A, you're going to be generating Fingers of Frost from both Orb and Ray of Frost, right? Which is very, very bad. So we never cast Orb before Ray. We're always going to cast Ray, get down to like 1 or 0 Fingers of Frost, and then consume our Orb, okay? Not much more to it than that. You can cast Orb during Winter's Chill. It's very normal to do so, in fact. So, you know, don't be afraid of that. Lastly, the last important mini cooldown here is Shifting Power. Shifting Power is very simple. You use it in one of 2 conditions. Either when all 3 of the mini cooldowns are 10 seconds or greater cooldown. So if Comet Storm, Ray, and Orb are 10 seconds or greater cooldown, and IV is less than 20 seconds. So basically just saying, IV is ready, I have Shifting Power, I'd rather cast it now and waste a bit of cooldown reduction on my mini spells, my mini cooldowns, than to actually cast it during Icy Veins, okay? So if either of these situations are met, that's when you can cast. Just to reiterate, it's when all 3 mini cooldowns have 10 seconds or more cooldown remaining, or Icy Veins is 20 seconds or less cooldown remaining. Now why do these numbers exist, the 10 second, 20 second? The 10 seconds is basically this idea of if let's say Comet Storm, which is usually the cooldown that might have less than 10 seconds, is like 5 seconds remaining, and you start casting Shifting Power, then the Comet Storm will go to 0, like, you know, it'll be ready, but then you're going to get 10 seconds more CDR on your other 2 abilities, which means that Comet Storm is going to come off cooldown like when the other spells are 20 seconds remaining on their cooldown. And then if you consume Comet Storm, then what's going to happen is when your Ray and Orb are ready, Comet Storm is going to be like 20 seconds cooldown or something like that, right? Or 10 seconds cooldown, which is very bad because we want to sync them up. Now you might ask, why do we want to sync them up? The reason you want to sync them up is this talent right here, which is this. Your Comet Storm increases damage that enemies take from you by 6% for 6 seconds. Technically, if you flurry, you have a 25% chance to call one Comet Storm like Comet, which applies as debuff anyway. But if you don't get this lucky situation, then basically you're missing out 6% damage on Ray and Orb if you don't sync them up. Okay? Now, sometimes things will get desynced naturally, because notice this says 10 seconds, not 15. 15 being 12 seconds reduction plus 3 seconds of shifting power time, cast time, right? Why is it 10, not 15? The idea is if you put it to 15, or if you try to do it at 15, there will be some attempts or some situations that will arise which will prevent you from casting shifting power for like 2 minutes, which is way too bad. It will sync up our cooldowns perfectly every time, but you're gonna start losing shifting powers in the long run in some situations. So we settle for 10 seconds because usually, even if it's 10 seconds, you don't actually end up wasting any. You don't end up desyncing your cooldowns that much, because obviously you cannot cast Comet Storm until you get a flurry. Same with Winter's Chill, or same with Ray and Orb. So technically they're gonna probably end up syncing anyway. It might desync, and if it does desync, it's not a big deal. You'll have to make some decisions around it, but yeah. As for opener, sorry, I had to do a little editing magic here. As for the opener, there is this infographic that I do like, although I don't agree with fully, but I'll use the opener. Shout out to, I believe it's Ty Mazen who made this opener, like infographic. So cool infographic visual representation. But yeah, basically your opener is this. You're gonna have Frostbolt, you're gonna Flurry, pop your your Lust, your Icy Veins, maybe double Lust, right? Potion, blah blah. After your Flurry, what do? You Comet Storm, right? Top priority. After Comet Storm, you have 2 Winter's Chill, so obviously you have to consume one, right? So we're going to go down here, we're going to consume one. And then after you've consumed one, you have only 1 Winter's Chill, so we're going to press Ray of Frost. Now, Ray of Frost is going to give us 2 Fingers of Frost. You are going to have anywhere between 3 to 5 icicles at this point, because our Frostbolt Flurry can either generate 1 or 2. So if we count our icicles, this is 1. This could be 2 and 3, or 1, 3 and 5, right? Or 1, 3 and 4, or 1, 2 and 4, any variation of that. So you're going to have 3 to 5. On this infographic, it says to basically always use 2 Ice Lances. So in this situation, he's saying, if you're on 3, obviously you're going to have to double Ice Lance, which is correct. And then after the double Ice Lance, you're going to GS, because you have 5, right? So you're going to GS Flurry. GS Prio is over here, right? So you're going to GS Flurry. And then after the Flurry, you're going to Orb Shifting Power, right? Now, what if you have 4 or 5? This infographic seems to suggest that you should Ice Lance once, and then Ice Lance again, later after the Flurry. So basically always going down to 0 Fingers of Frost before pressing Orb, right? Consuming your 2 Ice Lances always from Ray of Frost. This is where I kind of disagree, and I don't have 100% verifiable proof that this thing is wrong. But from my testing and what I believe and what makes sense to me, I think it's actually not correct to do this, except for this situation. I think that what you should do is instead get to 5, no matter what it takes. So if you need to Ice Lance twice, you Ice Lance twice. If you need to Ice Lance once, you Ice Lance once. If you don't need to at all, you obviously your GS Flurry. If you have 2 Fingers of Frost, which is only if you had 5 icicles, press 1 and then go straight into Orb Shifting Power. Okay? In this situation where you have 4, you're going to consume 1 Fingers of Frost, get to 5, GS Flurry. I would skip this Ice Lance and just do Orb Shifting Power. I'm not going to get into too much, but if you want an explanation, if you don't, just skip this next part. But if you do, my explanation for this is basically if you have 1 Fingers of Frost and you Frozen Orb Shifting Power, especially if you double lusted, the odds of you wasting a second Fingers of Frost is very low. And also, well, not very low, but it's low enough. And also on top of this, I actually prefer casting Frozen Orb when I have 1 Fingers of Frost, because by the time you consume 2 Fingers of Frost, you're actually going to get your 3rd Fingers of Frost from the Frozen Orb. And if you have already a GS Flurried Ice Lanced, then that means you only need 3 fingers of frost to get to 5, right? So it just lines up a lot nicer in that way. It's up to you if you want to follow me or the infographic. Both are good. You can do whichever. It's not going to affect your DPS in any meaningful way. So do what you want. But yeah, this is the opener. Uh, yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to mention. Just to reiterate, break our rotation into parts. Do I have Winter's Chill or no? If I have Winter's Chill, you're going to do this. Obviously, if you have mini cooldowns, your mini cooldowns take top priority. So if you ever flurried or you have Comet Storm and you have Ray, you want to be using those at some point. GS goes here between your mini cooldowns. Orb goes right under GS, shifting power. Take care of all of these top like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 conditions before you even start to look at your core rotation. Okay? Once you're near core rotation, think about, am I Winter's Chill or no? And if I'm not Winter's Chill, am I casting Frostbolt or no? If you're not casting Frostbolt, you're going to do everything else. If you are casting Frostbolt, you're going to cast Flurry right after. Okay? This spec is it's not super easy. It's not super hard, but it's, as you can tell, it's not super obvious sometimes. So I do really recommend you watch the next part, which I'm going to cover like the video analysis, where you can really get a visual example of what I'm talking about and how the rotation is going to flow when you're actually playing the game. Okay? Thank you for watching. I hope this video has been somewhat enlightening, at least, or educational. If you have any questions or anything that's confusing, feel free to drop it in the comments. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about stats or like embellishment or anything like that. Just sim it. I'm not a prophet, right? Stats are very, very complicated and always change. Your best stat might be what is normally your worst stat because your gear is in a certain area. So yeah. Yeah, I'll see you in the next part. Peace.